Warning. Proceeding without caution will bring you into spoiler territory for the media displayed on screen. Timestamps are gifted in the description and comment section. Viewer discretion is advised.
Arkham Shadows is the now 8th installment in the Arkham franchise, directed by Ryan Payton and written by Brendan Murphy, Alex O. Smith, Christopher Sims, Christos Engage, James Howell, and Paul Alexander. The game was released on October 21st, 2024, following up after the failure that was Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. But let's not talk about that. It's also the second ever VR game for the franchise after 2016's Arkham VR, as well as a MetaQuest 3 exclusive, which is where everybody got mad. Personally, for me, I was my usual contrarian self and not angry at the fact that it was an exclusive. Maybe it was because I knew there was a small sliver of a chance I would be able to play this game regardless, but also because I knew what VR technology was capable of nowadays. With my friend who actually owns VR gear having full-body trackers that I've gotten to use to jakey dance at furries and VR chat, I could see the potential in a VR Arkham game with technology like that. Hell, I was already seeing said potential when playing Arkham VR, which ended up being the cause of every complaint I had towards that game. And I could see that potential in the first combat trailer for this game. This shit looked exactly what I could picture in my head after playing Arkham VR. What I honestly wasn't expecting was to be able to play the game this soon. I was thinking I'd have to be like a few years late to it, which wouldn't be all that much of a surprise given my channel. But luckily, my aforementioned friend got a MetaQuest 3 for Christmas. So, without further ado, let's get on with this review because I have a lot to talk about. Arkham Shadow takes place in between Arkham Origins and Arkham Asylum, while also taking the events of Arkham Origins Blackgate into account in terms of its continuity. I think it's crazy that they canonized Blackgate when they could have easily just ignored it like the rest of the franchise and probably the fan base. I know I do. But nah, they went the extra step forward in making the spin-off of the spin-off canon. That already goes to show the level of care and detail that's in this game, and we haven't even begun talking about the actual story. Speaking of which, let's get into that. Unlike the previous games where everything happens in one night, Arkham Shadow's story spans across the course of 6 days. Why? Because it's the countdown to the Rat King's Day of Wrath. What's the Day of Wrath? Who is the Rat King? That is exactly what you aim to figure out. The only thing we know about the Day of Wrath is that it's going to kill a lot of people and happens in less than a week. So, over the course of said week, Batman plays dress-up as Matches Malone, a prisoner in Blackgate, who was sent there for arson. More specifically, throwing a Molotov cocktail at the bat signal. And yes, you're seeing that gameplay correctly. This isn't just a simple flashback. It's not a cutscene. It's actually you destroying the bat signal yourself. It's no longer a multi-billionaire philanthropist by day, embodiment of shadows by night. It's arsonist prisoner by day, embodiment of the shadows by night. During the days as matches, you explore the inner workings of Blackgate, get a look at several members of the Bat's Rogues Gallery, and ultimately use the inside of the prison in order to understand the people in there, to understand the criminals, and most importantly, find out who the Rat King is. You work your way through the system, gain the liking of a Carmine Falcone, and try to get on good graces with him, his crew, and the rats in the prison. And eventually, on every day, it has to be bedtime for the prisoners. During these times, you get to climb out of your cell, sneak your way into an underground makeshift Batcave built nearby, suit up as the Dark Knight, and continue your detective work but with better means. It's one thing to walk around the courtyard as a prisoner, it's another to grapple amongst the gargoyles and have your special little gadgets available to you. In between the nights are these top-down dream sequences that show a young Bruce Wayne and a young Harvey Dent growing up together and becoming brothers, as well as one where you witness the Wayne's death again, and you can see in the gameplay the moment I got annoyed. Harvey Dent ends up playing a pivotal role in this story, with you meeting him towards the beginning of the game before Batman locks himself up, during a meeting with Gordon about who this Rat King could possibly be. I love how the moment I heard the voice, I knew it had to be Troy Baker's Harvey Dent, and seeing a pre-Two-Face Harvey was already making my friend theorize that we'd be seeing the moment he becomes Two-Face. And he was correct! After being framed for the murder of Takio Yamashiro, a prison inmate that you meet on your second day and gives you some advice on how to get to Falcone, who actually was an undercover cop all along, Matches is sent to a court hearing. Harvey in courtrooms, we all know where this is going. Except I wasn't expecting it to go in this direction. The acid that gets thrown onto his face during most origin stories ends up being one of Jonathan Crane's experiments that he tries to force onto Matches. After knocking it out of his hands in order to avoid getting dosed by whatever f***ed up concoction the psychopath has created, it ends up on the side of Harvey's face. permanently scarring him and turning him into the Two-Face that we all know and love. And after several tricks as to who the Rat King truly is thrown at us throughout the story, it's Takio, it's Otis, it's Crane, it's Matches. Yeah, after the Harvey acid incident, Matches ends up on the death sentence but saved by the rats, and then they start calling you the Rat King. It's the weirdest part of the story. But anyways, after all these twists and turns, it's finally revealed to us that the Rat King was apparently Harvey Dent all along. I do not know how. Now, honestly, I really don't. One second you're chasing after an old World War II boat that's headed straight for Gotham, and the next second you find out it's being piloted by Two-Face and there's a bomb on the boat about to explode everybody on it before it can reach Gotham. And Batman just casually says that Harvey's the Rat King. After this, the whole Rat King storyline is dropped in order to finish the Bruce and Harvey subplot and the Two-Face origin story, and then the game ends. I could have entirely missed out on some dialogue that ties this all together and makes it make sense, or the writing could have just been very messy. Either way, I still enjoy it as an all-together experience. Quite honestly, the Rat King storyline is the least interesting thing about the game. What I loved was everything surrounding it. Getting to explore the insides of Blackgate in an almost open-world aspect, seeing characters like Scarface, or hearing about a Pamela Isley. On the first day of Blackgate, I found a note that was signed off with Dr. Q, and that made me so damn excited at the idea of seeing Harleen Quinzel as a psychiatrist. We got to see a tiny bit of her in Origins, so being able to see more of that pre-Harley Quinn version of her would have been so cool. And then we do! We get several long-lasting moments with Harleen, voiced by the wonderful Tara Strong, a group therapy session, watching her confront Dr. Crane about his inhumane treatment of the patients, as well as saving her from the Tiger Guards and hunting down Crane with her by our side, and I love every second of it. I love the way they wrote Harleen in this. She really is a very caring psychiatrist that genuinely wants the best for her patients. She puts up with some of the most insane bullshit because she truly thinks that they can be helped, and I love that. She actually cares about her job, which makes it even sadder seeing her fall into the Joker's arms in this universe. To think, she went from absolutely despising the way Crane was treating her patients to giving an 8-year-old cancer patient fucking Titan, all because a clown had a certain way with words. God, that's depressing. But going back to the story and what I think about it, overall, I really like it, even with a bit of a messy ending in terms of writing and one moment that is genuinely my one and only complaint with the entire story. I still enjoy this a lot. I love the back and forth between playing as Matches and playing as Batman, and the general going deeper into exploring that greatest detective aspect of the character that we've been getting in media lately. The moments where we have to fight without any of our gadgets and just with our fists and knowledge of the martial arts. The sneaking in and out of the prison every night that we have to do every time, yet it never gets monotonous or annoying. I fucking love getting to feel like I'm physically opening up the cell gate and leaving, or climbing up the walls to get back in. And, of course, I love Roger Craig Smith's excellent voice acting. The way he's able to switch between his more brutal than ever take on The Dark Knight to this heavy East Coast accent that barely even sounds the same is just beautiful, and I'm sure he had a lot of fun getting to play this kind of depiction of the character. We also get Barbara, voiced by Chelsea Kane. She ends up going by Oracle before the Killing Joke incident happens, but I don't care. Getting to have her around, meeting her in a random apartment building, and then later having her help with the case is just great. Hearing how excited she gets to info dump all her research on the Batman is just so damn cute. And I love every second we get to have her around. I've just now made the connection that this franchise ended up following a similar path as the Batman 2004 did, with having Barbara a part of the back row before Dick. So I guess that makes me wonder, if she's Oracle before becoming crippled, where does the Batgirl storyline come into play? Where the hell does Matter of Family end up in the timeline? Either way, I still love that she's around. And then there's one other thing that happens during the story that I obviously can't not bring up. During days 3 and 4 in Blackgate, after giving Bolton nothing but brain damage, you're sent into a different cell. One that's a lot smaller, with just enough room for a bed, and a cellmate right next to you, with a very familiar voice.
Well, look who's finally awake.
So, obviously, the main story of the game is not about the Joker. Yeah, you heard me correctly. This is now the second game in the franchise to not have Joker become the main villain, and instead he's just a voice cameo for these 2 short days. You don't even get to see him, only hear him through the walls. And then later when you come back to the room to interrogate a member of the Rat Gang, you can see a cell door open with a patient transfer report next to it. Signed off by a HQ. But I love this. Naturally, I just love the Joker. I love when he's around, especially when he's got a good actor performing him. Of course, they brought in Troy Baker to reprise his role. It's only fitting given the time placement, along with Roger Craig Smith being Batman in this game. I feel like these two have become their own version of Kevin and Mark. If Roger is Batman in something, get Troy to be the Joker. But I also just love how they didn't divert the story and just kept this to a small cameo that only takes up like 12 minutes of my 9-hour playtime. But what I love even more than all of that is that he recognizes who Matches truly is. The moment you talk to him, Batman tries to just play him off and continue to be under disguise, and the Joker just goes, the Eastern accent may fool everyone else, but not me, Batsy. And then he just plays along with it. He knows Matches is Batman. He's made Batman aware of that, but he doesn't out him or anything. He just goes along with it, and I think that's fucking great. It's also fun to just talk to him during this section and listen to Troy Baker's performance.
What do you want?
Right now, a gallon of gas, a book of matches, and a ham sandwich. But I'll settle for a little chit-chat.
The Carmine sections are also cool. Again, I love this whole playing dress-up aspect of the story and pretending to be a crook by actually teaming up with Falcone and getting on his good side. Of course, that's just to later abandon him and give his secret info to a Tiger Guard at the end, which makes sense. That's what Batman would do. But nonetheless, I still like these parts of the story. But I think now is where I should finally talk about the end of the game. The climax, the big reveal. After all these flashbacks of a young Bruce and Harvey growing up, after chasing Two-Face on this old World War II ship, you hit this point where the ships ran into Gotham. While climbing through the debris, Alfred plays you this voicemail that was left by Harvey, where he mentions finding the guy that offed your parents, and that he's finally going to do what's right. Then you finally meet up with Harvey, and there he is, standing there. With Joe, the guy back in Blackgate that would sell you posters and cosmetics for your cell, as well as help you get into certain parts of the prison. He was even there during the group therapy session. He's Joe Chill, the one who shot the Waynes. Quite honestly, I'm surprised I didn't already think of this. And of course, Harvey's got a gun loaded next to his head, ready to enact revenge. He brings up how he made a promise to Bruce, to which Batman says that this isn't what he would want. Harvey asks how he would know, and then the game lets you reach up and take the mask off, revealing your identity to Joe and Harvey, letting Joe escape, and having a one-on-one moment with Harvey before his Two-Face identity kicks in and sends the two of you off of a building. Then there's an epilogue that takes place between Bruce and Harvey, where Harvey grapples with the fact that he's now Two-Face before the credits roll. This is, honestly, easily the best ending to an Arkham game since City, and it might possibly even be better than City in some ways. While City has one of the greatest deaths of the Clown Prince of Crime, Shadow's ending just tugs at my heartstrings so much. This climactic moment between these two characters just hits me so much, and that's all thanks to Troy's exceptionally emotional acting in this scene. The way his voice breaks when he says the word promise, the way you can hear Harvey holding back tears when he yells at Joe that Bruce was just only a 10-year-old boy, just sends chills down my body even when writing this.
I made a promise to a 10-year-old boy! He was a little kid!
It's an insanely impactful ending, and I remember just sitting there in silence the whole time, feeling gutted whenever Troy showcases his incredible skill at voice acting. Now, while I love this ending a lot, it does contradict with something that was established in a previous game. As some of you may remember, when you take Two-Face to GCPD in Arkham Knight, he talks about the fateful night when he got the acid thrown onto his face, and specifically says, "I'm a freak because of you. You're the one who put that acid-throwing bastard in the dock." But that doesn't really align with the events that happened in this game. Technically, Batman was the one who got the acid thrown onto Harvey's face, but that was at the courtroom under the Matches disguise, which wasn't there on the ship. Now, an easy way around this is that you could think of it as the Two-Face side of Harvey confuse these two scenarios and have him convinced that Batman was at fault. The epilogue does show that Harvey and Two-Face are two different people that don't really even share the same memory, and when going back to that scene, you can hear when Troy slips in between the voices of the two characters.
Don't call me that! He's dead. I wish I was dead.
Or you could just see it as a contradiction. Either way, it doesn't bother me because I don't give a flying fuck about Arkham Bat Tank Simulator. But there is one thing I do give a fuck about, and it's the one problem I have with this game's entire story. It's a small one, not that big of an issue, but I think it's at least worth bringing up that they Fant4-stick the fucking Two-Face coin. During one of the flashback dream sequences, you get a scene where Harvey's dad is drunk and Harvey tells him that he's leaving. This angers his dad and he decides to flip a coin. Heads, he gets to leave. Tails, he gets the beating of his lifetime, to which he lands on Tails, but luckily Bruce steps in and saves Harvey, as well as the audience, from watching this play out. I think this is really dumb. Obviously, retconning the Thing's lovable catchphrase of "it's clobberin' time" as the Thing his older brother says before he beats him is a much worse depiction and take on an origin story, but I think it's still on the same level of dumb to apply this to the Two-Face coin. First of all, don't need an origin for Two-Face's coin, but I definitely don't need it to be the Thing his alcoholic father used in order to decide whether or not he was gonna beat him. Again, I love this game. I love its story. I love several other things about it that we will get into soon, but this was just a dumb idea, and I really don't understand why Camoflauj went through with it. It just leaves me more baffled than anything that they would take inspiration from fucking Fant Force Stick of all things, and to use one of the worst parts about it. But that's my one issue with the game. Just the fact that they Fant Force Stick the Two-Face coin. Other than that, I have, zero complaints. The story is great, and I love the trip it takes you on. It's also insane that it's an 8 to 10 hour average playtime for a VR game, but that definitely helps justify its existence way more than Arkham VR's 2-hour tech demo. It's also got some pretty good pacing, in my opinion, especially with the whole structuring of trading back and forth between matches and Batman. You don't really get any levels where you feel like you're stuck as matches for too long. It's a nice mix of the two, making it so you don't get sick of having no gadgets and giving you plenty of time to be Batman. The game's also very aware of what you've come here to play as. Despite starting out as matches in order to burn down the bat signal, once you're shot and experience the iconic Arkham death screen in VR, you then get to play as Batman for a solid 2 hours before becoming matches again, which I very much appreciate. The devs had a story they wanted to tell, they had an idea, and they knew what they wanted to do, and executed it perfectly, knowing that the fanbase and the players want to play as Batman in VR, and give you way more than enough time as that, while also getting to work in their idea of matches and pace it out in the best way that they could have. But enough of the story, let's get on to the real meat and potatoes of this video, the thing that I absolutely fucking adore this game for. Arkham Shadow's gameplay is absolute god tier. It is, and I am not being hyperbolic in the slightest when I say this, the perfect translation of the Arkham gameplay into VR, and I would even go to lengths of saying it's the best form of it in the entire franchise. Camoflauj uses the VR technology to its absolute limits and to all of its benefits to bring the gameplay we're all used to into the world of VR, and does it so goddamn beautifully. After 9 hours of playtime and several weeks to think about this game, I am still baffled at how amazing all of this feels. From the sheer fact that you can watch your character grapple instead of going into a fade-in, fade-out like in Arkham VR, to something so simple as bringing the controller up to your head and pressing a button in order to activate detective mode. Spreading your arms out in a T-pose to be both menacing in real life, but also to glide in the game, to physically grabbing onto ladders and pipes in order to climb around areas or play monkey bars. I said in my review of Arkham VR that the suit up at the beginning of the game made me feel more like Batman than any of the other Arkham games, and Camoflauj took that and went tenfold with it. I mean this with every ounce of seriousness I have in my body when I say this game makes you Batman. It doesn't just make you feel like you're Batman, it makes you become the Bat. And the perfection of the combat system backs this up. There is no other word I can use to describe the combat in this game but perfect. The way Camoflauj translated every bit of detail of the combat in the older games into the VR world and uses the most out of the modern technology of the console is nothing but astonishing. I mean it when I say every version of the old combat system is in this game, and it's so goddamn beautiful. Getting to actually throw my punches takes me from that simple feeling of being Batman to actually being the Dark Knight himself. Every combat encounter becomes a damn workout in how winded and sweaty I become after every single one of them. I got so immersed into this game, its combat, and its overall feel, that when I had to get to the courthouse at one point, as fast as I could, I was so ingrained into the combat and Roger Craig Smith's anger-filled delivery that I wasn't holding back my punches. I was not letting anybody go. Any enemy I came across was getting a concussion in a matter of seconds, and I was going to be brutal while doing it. During every beatdown, I would be going at it like I was physically giving someone brain damage. If I was ever extremely tired by the end of an encounter and there would be one enemy left, I'd slow down my last few punches on them while still making every one of them have the biggest impact of my fist into their skull. I would have loved to be my friend just standing in my room watching me stare at the ground and throwing punches into it so excessively and violently, knowing exactly what I'm doing without even having to look at the screen. You wanna know how immersive this combat is? I punched my damn anime light off the shelf and into the windowsill. Who needs Gorilla Tag to destroy my room when I could just be Batman? And that's just punching. They've implemented the cape stun beatdown, shield takedowns, stun baton takedowns, and blade dodges, and they're all so damn immaculate. For the cape stuns, you have to swing your right controller while holding down the trigger, like you're actually grabbing your cape and stunning the enemy, before beating them down, and God, is it so satisfying. I already loved getting to spam X as fast as I possibly could, but getting to actually throw as many punches as fast as I can just feels so damn good every time. Shield takedowns are the same as in the original games, having to cape stun them before attacking them from the air, but it's just so much fucking cooler in VR. Using the joysticks to jump over any thug with a stun baton and then turn around midair and attack them is fundamentally the same move as in the original games, but just feels leagues better in VR. And then the coolest damn shit out of all of them is the blade dodges. I normally never do these in the original games. For the longest time, I just never understood how to do it. But even when I do know, I just try to avoid it as much as I can and instead kind of look at the bladed thugs like they were the shielded ones. But in here, the moment I found out that the way they translated this move was to make it so you have to physically move your head in order to dodge the blades yourself, I got so damn giddy and genuinely wanted more bladed thugs so I had more opportunities to do this and understand the mechanic more and get better at it. This is what I mean by the game makes you become Batman. There's only so much you can do with a controller and some buttons, and as best as Rocksteady were able to do that with their combat system and to make you feel like the Bat, and how much they pushed that forward and made it feel the best they possibly could have in Arkham Knight, you're open to so many new possibilities when you're given the technology of the modern VR headset, and Camoflauj uses every bit of it in order to bring that Arkham combat to life in the most perfect way possible. They could have directly translated the same movements with something like the blade dodges. They could have just made it so you had to hold back on the joystick while pressing another button, but they didn't. They went the extra step and used the VR headset's capability to really bring out the best in this combat system and made it so you physically move to avoid the blade. You physically grab your cape to glide or stun. You physically throw every damn punch. Hell, when you get the back claw in order to open up the grates out of your reach, you have to grab onto the wire and pull the grate off yourself. You grab the grates yourself and pull them off, sliding them to the side to get in. You pick up the batarang off of your chest, lock it onto a target with your head, and then physically throw it. You grab a smoke bomb off your arm and throw it. You reach down to your waist and grab the explosive gel or the decoder. You physically reach up and grab enemies in order to sneak takedowns, or pick them up and push them off gargoyles for inverted takedowns. You're physically doing so much with your arms and head during combat and gameplay that it can't just make you feel like Batman, but make you become him more than any of the other games could have dreamed of doing. This is exactly what I would have imagined for an Arkham VR game, and then some. Even just stripping back everything, ignoring the takedowns, the combos, the controls, everything, and just looking at something as simple as climbing. To have to actually grab the rungs of a ladder or a brick poking out of a wall and pull yourself up to climb up is just god-tier levels of immersion, and I cannot give more praise to Camoflauj. They've done an absolutely fantastic job at designing the gameplay, the movement, and translating the Arkham combat that we all know and love into the VR world. The Predator missions are also perfect. I'm able to tackle them the exact same way I do in all the other games and have no problems. Grappling from gargoyle to gargoyle, slowly taking everybody out with an inverted takedown, throwing batarangs to cut them down and use the same gargoyle again for other enemies, throwing sonic batarangs in order to lure an enemy under me, grappling around the room in order to become hidden again. It's all the same shit I've been doing but in VR, and just like the rest of the gameplay, it feels amazing. I just love hanging off a gargoyle, waiting for a tiger guard to get in the right position for me to grab him, string him up, and then push him off the edge before disappearing into the dark. or even sometimes sneaking around on the floor and popping up from the grates for a sneak takedown and then immediately go back into hiding. I even like this feature they added where when you've been spotted, this red triangle appears with a countdown to when you're hidden again that goes down faster with each grapple to a different gargoyle. It's a nice visual to show you whether you're hidden or still have a threat that I appreciate. It may not have been something necessary in either the original games or in this one, but it's still nice and I like it. I'm sure there's many other things you can do that I'm not aware of because it's not in my usual repertoire. I collected several upgrades throughout the game that unlocked features that I never ended up using, but with just using what I'm used to from the original games, I can confidently say this combat system is an absolute peak for the franchise. And like I've said several times already, nothing but a perfect translation. I am still in awe that Camoflauj did this, and how greatly they succeeded at it. It's so good that after several combat encounters, I would literally be standing in my room doing the same movements that Batman does after combat challenges in the original games. Oh, and I somehow forgot about how they also brought in the crime scene investigation from Arkham Origins, and just like the combat, it's translated perfectly in this. Done a hell of a lot better than the rendition in Arkham VR. There's also this game's version of the cryptographic sequencer that is a pretty interesting take on the item. In the main series, you just have the two joysticks that you move around until locking in the right code. In Blackgate, it's just a set of numbers you have to align properly. VR doesn't even have it. And here, it's this weird globe-like thing that you move around in order to get both the cone and the side locks to be green. It's a much different take on the item than the rest of the franchise, even in comparison to Blackgate's already different take, that I do like. It took some getting used to, and it took a bit for me to actually understand, but once I figured out the mechanics, it became pretty simple. Now that we've talked about the story, the gameplay, and most importantly, the combat, I think it's time we finally talk about the boss fights. This game's got several, and they're actually pretty good for the most part. Instead of going over them in a ranking from least favorite to favorite like I did with the boss fights across the franchise, I'm just going to go by the order in which they happen because there's only like 4 of them. And honestly, the more I think about it, this would probably be the order they'd be in if I were to rank them. They just get better and better. Starting off, we got the encounter with Shrike at the beginning of the game before Batman becomes matches. It's just a Predator mission with him being a sniper, having to hide behind boxes and under the floors, slowly taking down the thugs on the floor before he escapes off. You become Obi-Wan Kenobi and gain the high ground in order to enact an inverted takedown on him, and then interrogate him before he lights himself on fire and jumps to his death. For a first fight this early in the game, it's pretty good. You've yet to hit the real potential of this game's combat, so it uses the basic knowledge you do have to its advantage. I genuinely really enjoyed having to dodge his red dot while taking out the other goons, and of course, getting to punch him in his stupid face while interrogating him. The next one is Carmine Falcone himself. He's now Obi-Wan Kenobi, positioned up on top of a ledge with his endless group of men to jump off and attack you, occasionally throwing grenades that apparently you can just throw a batarang at to let explode midair if you're cracked enough at this game to know that. I just ran away from them. Either way, you avoid getting blown up while attacking goon after goon after goon. Sometimes Falcone just pulls out a fucking minigun and you have to avoid getting barraged by that. In terms of fights against miniguns, this is leagues better than the Penguin boss fight in Blackgate. Now, while doing this, there will be these crates of explosives that come out in order for you to tag with explosive jail, push them back into the wall, and explode. Doing this 3 times eventually makes the ledge Carmine's on fall down to the ground with him going, and letting you get the last few hits on him and the information you need. This one's also pretty good. A bit rage-inducing here and there, but nothing in comparison to, say, Blackgate's Penguin fight. I like how the explosive crate mechanic was introduced a little bit before this fight, in a segment that felt kinda insignificant at the time, but when you're in this fight, you realize it was more of a tutorial level to get you set up for it. Top tier game design. And again, I love punching Falcone in the face. The third boss fight is Lyle Bolton. While the previous 2 fights were with the Batsuit, Bolton is while you're under the Match's disguise, which means all you have is your fist and your brains, which is insanely intimidating in the beginning. I was low-key kind of dreading this fight, a little scared to be real, because I didn't know how this would go or what I would have to do, if I would even survive. The fight mostly consists of dodging his whip of electricity, having the incredibly fun experience the blade dodges, and when you're able to, hopping on top of him and ripping out one of his electric charge battery things. I honestly don't know what they are. I just know they have to get ripped out like they're the tubes filling Bane's veins with venom. Oh, and of course your fair share of satisfying beatdowns. Eventually you knock him down onto the floor, letting you get on top and unload punch after punch after punch into his thick skull. and it's so damn satisfying and fun. Overall, really good. I enjoyed the various stages of the fight and the different mechanics that go into it, along with the overall concept of having to fight this geared up tank as just a human with no gadgets. I feel like this fight does a great way of translating the brains over bronze aspect of Batman. As I've said before in the past, Batman's superpower is his brains and the way he thinks his way through scenarios, and this fight does a great job at tackling that. But then there's the next and final boss fight. Technically, the last boss fight in the game is the Two-Face encounter, but I don't really consider that a boss or a fight. So this is the last one in my opinion, and easily the best in the game. Before we get into that, though, we need to rewind all the way back to the story. The very moment that Crane was introduced in this game, my first thought was, what if we get a fear gas section? And that's exactly what we get. When searching for Crane with Harley, you eventually find him with Scarface, giving him a dose of something insane he's created, that he does eventually dose you with. While you're heading through the hallways trying to find where Crane went, weird shit starts happening. Next thing you know, the hallways turn into Crime Alley. Already you can figure out what's going to happen here, and given the fact that we had already seen a top-down perspective of the Wayne's death, I was already thinking to myself, what the fuck? Can we stop with this shit? Why the hell do I have to sit through this again? And for a second time in the same game? But that's where my expectations were subverted, because you don't watch the Waynes die. Instead, you watch a nightmarish figure that resembles the Batman emerge from the shadows and just absolutely murder Joe Chill before he can do anything. And I mean murder. This thing does not hold back, throwing Joe into a brick wall, picking him up, kicking him across the street, and killing him. Well, this just got interesting. Leaving Crime Alley in such a trippy way that I can't help but not love, you end up in an apartment building, the same one that Harvey lived at. And then that's when you realize, this is the flashback where Harvey's dad almost beats him. The whole coin flip happens as usual, but instead of Child Bruce stepping in, the figure appears again, holding nothing back and killing Harvey's dad before disappearing again. After both of these interactions, there's a small bit of dialogue between Batman and the Shadow, where we're once again shown Roger Craig Smith's talent, trading between his Batman voice and this ultra dark, gritty, demonic voice that resembles nothing but the anger inside of Bruce. We get more fun gameplay with gliding in this void. Experiencing this in VR is just so damn cool, and I love these Scarecrow segments so much more than the ones in Asylum. And I loved those a lot to begin with, so that's saying something. In between the gliding sections are these small segments where you fight against some lanky depictions of the Shadow that are very reminiscent of the skeletons during the Asylum segments, before eventually getting to the actual boss fight. Not really against Scarecrow, but against the Shadow in his massive form. The fight's quite simple, with you throwing batarangs into his open chest when you can, fighting off the shadow creatures until the area fills with fog, and you have to dodge the attacks of the Shadow, making use of the same mechanics used for the blade dodge, so this is insanely fun. After successfully dodging each attack and doing the right beatdown maneuvers, you can make the Shadow turn back into Crane for a little bit before he goes back into being the Shadow, where you then repeat this whole process again, only with flying bats that you have to take down with the Batclaw. I'm sure on other difficulties you have to do this more times, but for me on easy mode, I only had to do it twice before the boss was over. This fight is, like I said, the best in the entire game, and one of the best in the franchises in my opinion. I like how it combines a lot of the gameplay mechanics you've learned up until this point, while also exploring with the Scarecrow fear gas and giving us this shadow creature. A depiction of Batman if he were to embrace himself deep into his anger and stoop to the lows of the criminals and start killing. If he didn't have his one rule or his compassion for the people he locks up, this is what he would become. Alfred has this line afterwards that I think sums up the idea of the Shadow perfectly, and I just love it so much.
You met the man I feel you would like to become.
Overall, it's a fucking great boss fight, and the kind that made me stand up in order to complete. Like, genuinely in the moment, I felt like sitting down was doing me a disservice, and I was like, I need to stand in order to get into this. I need to be locked into this shit. Oh yeah, and, Frodo voices Jonathan Crane in this game. I have nothing to say, I just think that's really interesting. Oh yeah, and Bird's in this game! I mean, you beat him up and he goes down quickly, but he's in the game! There's just a few other things of note that I want to talk about before getting into the overall section. First off, the collectibles. Yes, just like with every other Arkham game, there are a bunch of things you can collect throughout the story, and not a single one of them is Riddler trophies, and I fucking love that. Yeah, there is a reskin version of them, which are the Rat King idols and the Rat radios, that involves similar things to get to. either turning the right corner, going into a grate, or putting in a specific code to unlock the area to get to. These are things that come with any Riddler trophy, but at least you're not getting anything Riddler related. It stays true to the story, making it Rat King focused, and the best part is that when you get them, you have to break them. Which means even though these are fundamentally reskinned Riddler trophies, I can at least put a little bit of my rage into the tiredness of these damn things and chuck them across the room or throw them hard into the ground and watch them break every time. There's also the Echoes of the Past that I only collected like 1 or 2 of. One of which showing me Blackgate Joker that ultimately told me that they put that game into account for the canon and shocked me right then and there. I'll be real, I didn't go collection hunting in this playthrough, but it is nice that they're there and Camoflauj went through the effort of making them either an entirely new thing or at least fit in with the story's narrative instead of just cramming Riddler into this because it's an Arkham game. Therefore, it's gonna have Riddler. I don't know, I feel like Camoflauj looked at the fact that the fan base is like very fucking tired of Riddler and the Joker and was like, alright, we'll give Joker for like 12 minutes out of fucking 10 hours, and then we're not even gonna give you Riddler. I appreciate it. The other thing of note is the soundtrack. Composed by Kazuma Janucci, this shit sounds so perfect. It fits right in with the rest of the other soundtracks in the franchise, with several moments in my playthrough that I would hear a melody or a motif and go, yep, that feels like Arkham. I was even listening to a fan-made compilation of the soundtrack while writing this, and I love all the use of electric guitar that reminded me of Origins, while also just kicking ass. I hope one day the OST gets an official release on streaming and I can put it in my playlist of favorite scores. This man did the soundtrack to Ruby Ice Kingdom? I hate how many things end up linking in my life. Another thing I'll mention is the voicemails, mostly because one of them is by Andrea Beaumont, the love interest in Mask of the Phantasm, so automatically this game is a 10 out of 10 best game in the franchise. Any reference to the best Batman movie of all time is a dub in my book. And finally, I'll mention the epilogue if you complete the New Game Plus mode, which I, of course, did not. I never play New Game Plus, but I got this scene spoiled to me before I could finish the game, so when I was done with the story, I immediately watched it, and I feel like I have to at least mention it in here. It's the introduction of Dick Grayson into the franchise. I mean, he already existed, but this at least shows his origins in the universe. Being an adult by the time Bruce adopts him, it seems. Also, his best friend and the only family he had after his parents' murder turns out to be Shrike, the guy who lit himself on fire at the beginning of the game. Finding that out made me fucking speechless. And apparently the decoy you find earlier in the game when trying to get to Shrike is actually Dick Grayson. God, I love the attention to detail in this game. Overall, Arkham Shadow is without a doubt one of my favorite games in the franchise. I won't waste any time and say it's probably ranked as my 3rd favorite underneath Origins. There's even a strong possibility it could top Origins, but I also have a lot of nostalgia for that game, so it's a bit hard to do that. Either way, it's one of the best, with its genuinely good story that's a new take on the kind of stories we can get in this franchise, and its perfect adaptation of the Arkham's iconic combat system. I love how this is an Arkham game that focuses on someone other than the Joker. While it does try to create a new character just to try to make it a twist villain, I think it works way better than the attempt Rocksteady tried to make for Red Hood and Arkham Knight. Part of that being how they completely botched Jason Todd as a character, making him an annoying crybaby in that game that complains all the time and says he wants to kill Batman, but never takes any of the very fucking obvious and easy chances he could make. The Arkham Knight is actually Red Hood idea failed because of the context behind Jason Todd as a character in the comics and the way they went about adapting him in the game. Not to mention the rushed origins of Jason and the events that happened in Death of the Family that made it so painfully obvious who the Arkham Knight was. While the identity of the Rat King can kind of work in this game due to it seeming more like it's an idea even in this world. There was no moment in this game where I thought I could pinpoint who the Rat King actually was, and with all the twists and turns of who it could possibly be and everybody being wrong, I'm starting to think that maybe the Rat King never existed. Maybe he was just a concept created by somebody that spread amongst enough people to eventually form a cult, and nobody actually knows. Otis is somebody that talks about the Rat King like he personally knows him, but once it's revealed that Matches is the Rat King, he's surprised at who he is. And that's not even the reveal, because then it's thrown onto Harvey, even though Harvey believes the Rat King is somebody else. I genuinely don't think the Rat King is an actual person that exists, and is just a concept and an idea that people started believing in. I could be wrong, though, but that's just my interpretation. But also, the story ends up being more of a Two-Face origin story that they kept pretty true to the comics, keeping the characters intact with who they fundamentally are, paying respect and homage to the core aspects of these stories, and in general just being incredibly well written and acted. That final moment between Bruce and Harvey on the ship is so much more emotional and impacting than any moment between Bruce and Jason and Arkham Knight. But enough of Arkham Knight. Arkham Shadow's story is also just different in comparison to everything else. It takes a deeper approach to the greatest detective aspect of Batman, giving us a unique perspective and gameplay to be had with the mystery. Combine that with the perfect translation of the combat system, and using the modern-day VR technology at its most to benefit the gameplay, along with its amazing score and spectacular voice acting, you get one of the best games in this franchise. You'll get a game that, in my opinion, wipes the floor with the last 4 games released in this series, and shows the utter talent that Camoflauj has. I want them to make more VR games in the future. I want them to be given more IPs to translate into the VR world. Give them Spider-Man, John Wick, Harry Potter. Hell, I'll take a Lord of the Rings game, and I've never even seen the movies. I just wish nothing but the best for Camoflauj and the people that work there. I hope they're able to create more VR games, because they've proven what they're capable of doing. And they're capable of doing the greatest shit I've ever had the pleasure of experiencing. Seriously though, Insomniac, let them make a Spider-Man VR game. I will buy myself my own headset just to play that. But yeah, Arkham Shadow is amazing. It's a shame it's a MetaQuest 3 exclusive because of how great it is. I would love if it ever managed to end up on Steam so people with different kinds of VR gear can be able to play this. But I'm just thankful that I got the chance to experience this. Thank you so much, Getting Olive, for letting me use your headset and helping me record my playthrough. How the hell this game came out the same year Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League released and died is beyond me. But it's also kind of funny. A running theme of my Arkham retrospective was WB Montreal doing things in the Arkhamverse that were better than Rocksteady, and to see this mostly unknown game studio step in and wipe the floor, releasing the perfect Arkham game the same year Rocksteady released their embarrassment of an inclusion to the franchise, is just fucking hilarious. Not to mention, they made a better Arkham VR game than Rocksteady did. To be fair, they did also have the advantage of better technology, but they did also write an actual story for the game. So anyways, congratulations Camoflauj for making such an amazing entry for the Arkhamverse. Y'all deserve all the rewards you got for this game, and I wish nothing but the best for the studio. I hope you guys get to continue to make amazing VR games for other IPs, or even get to continue to make more Arkham games. And with that is the end of the Arkham Shadow review. The best Arkham VR game out of the 2, and the 3rd best game in the entire franchise.
And of course, everyone has their own opinion, but my opinion is the best opinion. I'm sure you figured that out already.
Subscribe and please